Good morning. I realize I haven't been saying the date. I don't know that it matters, but it's January 28th, 2025. And welcome to this edition of Turn Your Magic All the Way Up, a ridiculous guide to discovering yourself after narcissistic abuse. The little book with the long title, available on Amazon. I'll put the link in the bio below, description below. Kindle, paperback, audiobook read by me, or you can just tune in here on this channel every week. I'm reading a chapter. This week is chapter 8. Also, I wrote this book with the Spotify playlist because music is important to me. And if you want to know what songs I was hearing when I was writing this, the link to the Spotify playlist will also be in the description below. So today, chapter 8, I realize I haven't really told you guys how many chapters are even in this book. There are 19 chapters, so we're nearly halfway through. And chapter 8 is where it all begins. Chapter 8 is called Narc number 1, the Grandiose One. This is what we've all been waiting for. Buckle up. Song, Truth Hurts by Lizzo. P.S. This might be a little long. These chapters about the narcs are longer than the other ones. Here we go. And then, dun dun dun, enter villain, stage right. Here I was, finally in California, where I had wanted to be for the past decade, in an apartment with only my things, only my animals, where I could do what I want, sing what I want, watch what I want. It was my first unknowing attempt at letting my inner child have freedom, and it felt so awesome. My Facebook posts state I was at, quote unquote, peak happiness level. I had made the conscious decision to come out here and stop worrying about what other people thought of me, to wear a rainbow tutu if I wanted to be an actor at a local theater if I could nail a role, to sing karaoke, to do all the things that I had previously been mortified to even consider. No one knew me here. I didn't feel judged. I was attempting to live my new life without any shame. Southern California was home to millions. I could blend in or stand out depending on my choices. And for once, I was just thrilled to be making them. My marriage was open. And although my ex-husband wasn't thrilled with the idea, he went along with it. He too recognized that we were on the verge of divorce. And here is where the trouble begins. In my quote unquote living out loud stage of breaking free from a stale marriage, I was prime picking for a predator like Narc number 1. I had met my husband online way back in 2000, so online dating was never an intimidating thing for me. I had always been super comfortable with it. And now it's normal. Tinder, oh no. Tinder was where I heard everyone was these days. I wasn't looking to settle down, so I went on there looking for a, oh God, I hate even saying this, quote unquote, dominant alpha male. I didn't know what I was saying. Yep, those terrible words exactly. Why did I say that? Because I wanted to play out the BDSM fantasy I'd had for years after reading Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty series books. She puts 50 Shades of terrible writing to shame, by the way. What better place than Southern California to try to find someone who really knew what they were doing, right? Oy. I met a few coffee date alphas that made me laugh. I was more confident than they were. One that thought that by shoving his hand down my pants in the parking lot made him dominant. Yeah, that happened. There were a few lapses in judgment, but it was all so new to me, and a lot of it was fun, that I didn't really care. I did have one major hit with a guy named Brad. Hi, Brad. Brad was a true dominant who showed me in just one night how awesome the right experience could be. Hats off to you, Brad, even though I have suspicions that you also are a narc. I can thank you for showing me that the fun I had imagined all those years could be real, and it gave me hope to keep looking. While I honestly wanted to pursue him more, I knew that I was looking for more one-on-one treatment, and Brad kept us stable. I wasn't really looking for that kind of depersonalization just yet, so I kept browsing Tinder. Makes sense. Narc number 1 saw alpha male in my Tinder ad and took it as a personal challenge to show me that a 5'5" leprechaun could ruin my world if I just gave him the chance. because to him, there's nothing more dominant than that. For reference, I am 5'10". Song, Slut Like You by Pink. I found his charm, his charisma, his confidence magnetizing. I put it in quotes because it was all fake. Con man. Looking back, it all just feels slimy and gross. But he found me at the right time when being a grandiose narcissist sounded like fun to me, apparently, without me realizing that's what he actually was. Remember that I thought a vapid narcissist was just a fun name for someone on a TV show who had a big ego. After my boring beige ex-husband, I saw a chance for some true color. He possessed such confidence in himself that he could wear silly, ridiculous-looking superhero costumes at kids' parties and still own the room. Everyone around him knew he was in charge. He could control an audience. In his brain, he was that superhero, and by God, you better pay attention because he was the shit. Anyone who knows a grandiose narcissist knows the kind of guy I'm talking about here. He liked kids because they were easier to manipulate, easier to make them listen to him. Kids, older people in retirement communities, and the newly divorced. He preyed on the kind and the vulnerable. Sweet guy. He was a local stage actor who helped me get my first taste of theater, and for a short while it was a colorful and fun relationship, and I mean like short, like a month. I was ignoring all the red flags because I was married. I was in an open relationship. We were only having fun together with no strings attached, and this one didn't matter that much anyway. He was 5 inches shorter than me. Being taller than me has always been one of my true prerequisites for dating a guy. It's kind of hard for me, personally, to feel dainty and feminine when I'm towering over them, you know? Sidebar. This should have been the first red flag when he gaslit/catfished me about how tall he was before our first date. I should have called him a liar right then and ran. But him being the snake oil salesman, let me just talk to him once and I can win him over type that he was, he convinced me that height meant nothing and I shouldn't be so shallow. He was testing boundaries, and because I didn't want to be considered mean and was open to trying new things, I lost. In October 2019, things escalated. At quote-unquote peak happiness level, I decided to try to get back into riding horses again. It had previously been my entire life's passion, and I found I kind of missed it. I found a horse someone needed to exercise, then promptly put myself in a terrible position and got myself bucked off. I wound up fracturing 4 of my spinal processes on the right side of my lower back, and I was incapacitated fully until it healed. I lived on the top floor of a 3-story apartment complex with no elevator. I wasn't going anywhere for a long while. This unfortunate event allowed Narc number 1 to move into my 2-bedroom apartment with me as my caretaker while I healed. This time spent together proved to act as a trauma bond, and we decided we would date each other. We would date each other exclusively from that point on. I had already informed my husband that I wanted a divorce by then. I allowed myself to be vulnerable in all ways with this guy. I was trying a brand new approach to life. I had gotten off all antidepressants when I moved to California and was making myself be more open, vulnerable, and willing to try new things, even if they were goofy or sappy. Things I would have shied away with when I was in my earlier years. With Narc number 1, I decided to allow myself to finally be as silly and romantic and completely vulnerable as my little heart wanted to. I put it all out there, no holds barred. That's why when the truth came out, this first experience with a narcissist ripped my heart and soul to shreds. Sorry about the heat, but it's cold. Hopefully that's not too loud. Song, Best Days of Your Life by Kelly Pickler. I write a lot. Surprise! And keep everything. So in research for this book, I have gone back through my notes and letters to good old Narc number 1 to refresh the old memory. I sure blocked out a lot once I realized none of it was real, and thank goodness for that. It's amazing how protective our brains can be and in this instance, I'm very thankful. There is serious trauma with this one. I imagine this is how the brain works when a child is sexually assaulted or serious trauma occurs. I imagine the victim's brain would recognize it, allow enough time to label it for what it is, acknowledge it, and then lock that shit away somewhere, because you just don't need to ever think about that kind of darkness. It's just too damaging. But for book writing purposes, I've had to poke the bear. Reading the love letter I sent him on August 23rd, 2019 for his birthday made me react violently. In about a 30-second time span, I went through all the emotions. 1, disgust. Gross, so gross. Bleh. How could you feel that way for that slimy snail? 2, anger. Oh my God, you dummy. No! How are you falling for it? And here I stopped to remind myself to never talk to myself that way anymore. Especially to that naive little girl inside who didn't know any better and just wanted to love. It's not her fault that jackass chose to abuse her. Okay, number 3, astonishment. I am talking about myself when I am complimenting him, because everything he showed me wasn't even real. I liked his color. I thought he was hot. I thought he was better than me in every way. He made me feel brave, etc., etc. He was just an act. He was playing a part in a movie. His movie. Those feelings I got to experience, though, those were real, and those were mine. I made those. And if I could feel that way with someone abusing me, then just imagine how I could feel once I realized I could do it on my own. A favorite memory I have that unfortunately involves him is being told at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles that we made a quote-unquote majestic couple. Probably because I was all dolled up and looking like a model, and he looked like, well, a miniature magician. But that majestic comment, Narc number 1 is nothing but a black hole and mirrors whoever he is with at the time. So the magic they saw, that was all me. Number 4, sympathy. Oh, you poor child. You really did love him and believe it was real. I can hear your low self-esteem loud and clear each time you say, "You're so much cooler than me," or "I didn't think I'd be your type." You are worthy. You are enough. You are way too good for this guy. Narc number 1 ate up all the attention I lavished on him, and he really loved that I was hurt and incapacitated, because that meant I couldn't leave the house. He could then go to work, quote unquote, and not come home because he was staying at a friend's house after a late night of karaoke, or whatever story he chose to dish out at that time. And I couldn't take a drive to track him down. I remember how legit sad he was when I healed as quickly as I did. I think he was disappointed that he wouldn't have a captive audience with 100% focus on him anytime he desired it anymore. While I was hurt and trapped in the apartment, he was glad I had no way to check up on him and see if he was telling the truth. But honestly, back then it didn't even cross my mind that he'd be lying or cheating on me, because why? Why would he? We were getting along great. The relationship was brand new, and we were so happy. The sex was awesome. Song, Gaslighter by the Chicks. When I was finally healed enough to drive, he invited me to meet him to watch a play he was in. Pulling my car into the parking lot, I caught sight of him swatting the ass of his ex-friend with benefits, but he explained it away as him just being playful. I found out later this friend of his was only one of his flying monkeys who had never stopped, who he had never stopped manipulating and sleeping with throughout our entire relationship. He had a couple girls like that. One who bought him things like trips to Vegas. One was a woman in an unhappy marriage, and another was a single, lonely, retired woman who had fallen for his ruse of never catching a break and woe is me. And she was determined to help him, as I think we all wanted to do. She even came to my restraining order case against him to back him up. That's how brainwashed she was. Ugh. From what I know, she is still his flying monkey and still falling for his shit. Poor thing. But again, that's her path. I ended up making friends with a different ex-friends with benefits. He had a lot, but at least this one I didn't think he was sleeping with. At least to this day, I don't think he was sleeping. Who knows? Let me restart that sentence. I ended up making friends with a different ex-friends with benefits of his when we all did a play together. He thought by introducing us it would stir up drama and competition over him and give him some narcissistic fuel for his tank. I guarantee it. That kind of backfired on him, though. I didn't hate her. Instead, I wanted to become her best friend because we had a ton in common. I didn't have many friends here in California, so I was thrilled to meet her. I'll just call her Jay. One of the things Narc number one led with when he first met me was that his job entailed working with a bunch of young women to play princesses to his superheroes, and that because he liked Disney and theater, most of his friends were female. He said he never publicly listed on Facebook that he was in a relationship because, quote unquote, women could be catty and jealous. And sometimes he got business by being a flirt and letting them believe he was single. I didn't really care because I had a male best friend back in Texas for a very long time, and it had been strictly platonic, so I knew it could be done and had no reason to question him. Red flag, though, you trusting, naive child. Everyone I have told this story to have shaken their head and said, I can't believe you fell for that. But don't you see how I was conditioned to fall for that? Between my dad's emotional wounding, needing to feel seen and heard, and my mom instilling, everyone is different, it doesn't make them wrong, and allow people to be who they are without judgment. I was created to see nothing wrong. Narc number one was a real douchebag. He had also refused to talk about his past with me at all, saying it wasn't important and he didn't live there, quote unquote. So he saw no need to ever bring it up. Huge red flag. Publicly stating that you are in a relationship closed the door to people he was trying to use and sleep with, so that wasn't going to happen. He also didn't want any of his exes, like my savior, Vanessa, spotting that he was in a relationship with a real woman and therefore they could track her down and warn her of the monster he really was. Song Hurts Like Hell by Madison Beer and Offset. I allowed it without question. I had no reason not to trust him, and I thought he had no reason to lie. Turns out narcs live for lying and outfoxing people. Doing shit to their victims without them catching on is a narcissist's jam. Narc number one thrived off of it. Why am I not being able to talk all of a sudden? Narc number one thrived off it. I believe it made him feel smart and superior because he was, quote unquote, getting away with it, at least temporarily. Narc number one introduced me to a few new ways of fighting, too. Once, he yelled at me in a Yoshinoya restaurant about religion and the Bible. I am not religious. Then stormed out without his phone. I sat and finished my meal, expecting him to calm down and come back inside. When I finally realized he wasn't coming back and I had his only way of communication, I went looking and couldn't find him anywhere. I panicked and drove up and down all the streets, crying and wondering if he was okay. I gave up 20 minutes later and drove home in tears, hoping he wasn't hurt somewhere, only to have him come walking in the door a little later. He said he had hitched a ride with a UPS driver. What the fuck? I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. I believe now that he had it all set up before we even got to that restaurant. I bet he knew some girl in that neighborhood, created an argument on purpose, went storming off to her house to fuck her real quick, got a ride home, and then used it as a guilt trip against me for, quote unquote, making him so angry that he had to leave. I was so distraught that I was just glad he was okay. So that's the way that argument ended. Another fight began because I was angry and needed consoling, and he immediately turned it around so that he was angry and he needed consoling. But I was the selfish one when I pointed that out. Another incident was an argument I vividly remember as the words not even making sense. He was arguing in circles, and I was so confused and not even able to keep up with his train of thought that I literally stopped him mid-sentence and told him, I can't argue with you like this. It's ridiculous. And I just stopped engaging. I went gray rock before I knew what gray rock was. Good job, past me. That kind of arguing is a narc tactic called word salad, and is done on purpose to confuse the victims and make them doubt themselves and question their reality. Just listen to any of Trump's speeches. Word salad. Don't make sense. Song Lips Are Moving by Meghan Trainor. He loved to play games with semantics, though. Here's an example. I'd say, I think black trucks are beautiful. He would then say, anyone who thinks black trucks are beautiful is an idiot. I'd get offended, rightly so, and respond, so you're saying I'm an idiot? He'd then immediately snap back at me and start yelling, I never said that. How dare you put words in my mouth? And suddenly there I was at fault again for calling him out on his bullshit and therefore deserving of his wrath. They love to put you in a double bind, no-win situation. They truly feed off your frustration, knowing it was them that caused it in you, knowing they have enough control over you to make you lose control of your emotions. They enjoy being a puppet master and watching you dance, monkey dance, for their entertainment. But back to making friends with Jay, his ex-friends with benefits. Jay and Narc number 1 went to Disneyland together, insisting just as friends. He came home late, hugged me, told me he missed me and wished it would have been me there instead of Jay. Then we had sex and he passed out. Shortly after he passed out, I got a ping on my phone, a text from Jay. She informed me that Narc number 1 had kissed her and felt her up while on my favorite ride, the Haunted Mansion, and she felt I should know. I took a deep breath, immediately got out of bed, quietly packed all his shit in black plastic trash bags. He didn't have much, and it only took about 5 bags. It's also a huge red flag if a guy in his late 40s lives out of a bunch of trash bags, folks. When all his shit was packed and sitting by the front door, I woke him out of his slumber. I just said, wake up and get out. I didn't even tell him why, because I know he knew why. He acted confused. He played the victim, begging to, at the very least, be told why I was doing this to him. I refused to tell him. I know he knew. Thankfully, he did leave. He knew he had fucked up. I was devastated. I had been vulnerable. I had been honest. I had opened my home and my bed, and not even 3 months into a relationship, he was cheating on me. I was so hurt. I decided I would immediately hop back on Tinder and find me a real man, because Narc number 1 obviously didn't give a shit about me. I told myself I didn't give a shit about him either. I obviously hadn't fixed the issue that drew me to Narc number 1, so who did I meet that very next day while on the rebound from the pain of being cheated on? Narc number 2 at your service. We'll get more into Narc number 2 when we get to his chapter, but Narc number 1 ain't over yet. How's my hair, guys? You see, Narc number 1 finally figured out why I kicked him out, and he adamantly argued that he didn't feel Jay up, but he did admit to kissing her. So he felt he deserved one more try from me because she had lied to make me jealous. Besides, the kiss was just a goodbye peck, since they wouldn't be Disney bounding anymore together. Gullible. That was me. I had experienced a new kind of joy with Narc number 1, who love bombed and groomed me with texts and Facebook posts and messages that I just loved. He did everything my beige ex-husband didn't do, and I didn't like the idea of all that color draining from my life when he left, so I decided to let him back in. Narc number 2 wasn't letting go that easily of such a prime source of potential narcissistic fuel, however, so instead of dropping me and finding a new victim, he and I became just friends. Song Wish We Never Met by Who Hurt You. Of course, it wasn't long before Narc number one was back to his word salad deceptive ways. I was seeing it was confusing and not healthy, even if I couldn't put a name to what it was that I was living through. Here's how I broke up with him after 5 months together. We went to see a movie one night after having a great day together. At the end of the movie, he asked me my opinion of the film. I told him the truth, that I had liked it, but I thought the storyline was a bit contrived, cliche, and overdone. He ranted that I was impossible to please and always negative. I was taken aback by this response. And I got another karma fairy moment where I got to mirror his own bullshit back on him in this instance, and I think it might have been what broke him. I told him that just that very morning, he had gone on and on about how, quote, when you respect someone, you tell the truth right to their face, unquote. And here I was telling him my honest opinion, and he was getting angry and yelling at me for it. I asked him why he was sabotaging us after we had just had a great day. He said he had to walk home to calm down. They do love making you feel confused, and I sure was. I was asked my opinion, then berated for giving it. We were well over 5 miles from the apartment. I was in tears as he stormed away. This was just like the Yoshinoya experience, and I saw a toxic pattern emerging. I had to get out of this. I was officially done. I called up my new friend in Narc number 2, who graciously advised me how to handle this breakup and gave me all the tools I needed to get out from under Narc number 1. Narc number 2 advised me not to go home to my apartment if I didn't have to, except to feed my cats, because Narc number 1 would be waiting for me, trying to talk to me and use his gift of gab to win me back. So I stayed at Narc number 2's house, strictly platonic, I swear. At that point, no funny business and no hanky-panky, because I was pretty traumatized and still not rid of number 1. I didn't want guilt to be a part of my trauma too. So just friends we remained. Narc number 1 tried to hoover me back in, of course, and when that didn't work, he moved out and posted a bunch of, oh, woe is me, status updates on Facebook and Instagram, all about losing me and having to move. For once, he posted my name. Thank the universe he did. This is when Vanessa tracked me down. On January 9th, 2020, I learned the real, honest-to-God definition of what a narcissist really was. This is when the shit really hit the fan for me, and I started voraciously reading every little thing about what a narcissist was, what the cluster B personality disorders were, and digging up all the background info I needed about Narc number 1 to make sense of what I had just experienced. Narcissistic abuse syndrome was in full effect. I was so confused about what had just happened and who I was. Flashbacks, breakdowns. I ended up taking leave from work because I would have panic attacks while sitting at my desk at random times and just burst into tears running to the bathroom. They call it CPTSD, or complex PTSD, which is for those of us who experience traumatic events spread out over time rather than just one singular traumatic event. Song Blow Me One Last Kiss by Pink. Narc number 2 acted as my bodyguard during the breakup and moved into my spare bedroom to help be a witness to and dissuade Narc number 1 from any stalking, harassment, or sabotage. I experienced gaslighting from Narc number 1. I wasn't there, I was working, quote unquote, when I clearly heard loud bangs on the wall outside of my apartment, followed by screeching tires leaving my complex, only to look out my window and see his minivan pulling away. He even pulled the windshield wiper blades off Narc number 2's car and placed nails under his tires. We took pictures for documentation purposes. I decided the only way to get him to stop was to get a restraining order against him. I mistakenly gave him the courtesy of knowing what I was doing. But all that did was give him time to show up and fight the temporary order. When he showed up to dispute it, the court then scheduled a hearing for a month later to see if it needed to be made permanent. I had 30 days to sit and stew about having to face him again in court. 30 days of anxiety and reliving trauma. Awesome. Never be nice to a narcissist. They will use it against you every time. I got to call him out in court, but he promised to be a good boy and they believed him. Luckily, the threat of the law was enough to keep him away from me, so he did indeed stop. The flashbacks that dropped me down to my knees, however, did not. Those continued for a long time. CPTSD. It was my first experience with being used, with being manipulated, cheated on, lied to, for no other reason other than because that was just the type of person he was. I didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I had done everything right and tried to be a loving, supportive, non-judgmental, open-minded girlfriend in every possible way, only to be shit on because he could. And because it made him feel like a big shot when he pulled the wool over someone's eyes and got away with it. Every victim of narcissistic abuse knows there's no feeling to be compared to waking up to the fact that you've been sharing your life, your body, your home with someone who isn't real. With a con man who doesn't even like you. It demolishes your soul and belief in humanity. It feels like your insides are ripping apart and you question everything you know about yourself and about life. It's the most horrendous thing I have ever felt. Song, Revenge by Pink. I love how these narcs feel they're all big-time winners and smarter than everyone when the only way they get to win is when no one knows they're in a game and no one knows the rules. Congrats, guys. What the fuck do you win in a game like that? A lifetime of misery and loneliness, that's what. Good job. You can have it. It's all yours. Once Vanessa found me and I heard about Narc number one's history of abuse with other women he had dated, I felt pretty damn disgusted that I had allowed such a slimy, malevolent creature to fool me. Even seeing him in court that last day, he looked like a different person. Like he had already torn off the mask he had created for me, thrown that one in the garbage disposal. That mask didn't exist anymore, and the person there in court with me was what had been lurking underneath all along. A stranger to me now. I did not recognize him at all. In another brilliant #Karma Fairy moment, I was able to present a binder full of information I had gathered about him and his abusive, toxic ways to both him and the courts while attempting my restraining order. That binder was a thing of beauty, with an index and color-coded tabs and everything. I had text from exes, former restraining orders against him with other women, his suspected arson perpetration, the sexual misconduct with a minor, and pictures of what he'd done to Narc number two's car. Narc number one had the audacity to question in court, in front of the judge, how I knew that it was him peeing inside of me during sex. I will discuss this more in the sex chapter. Just know he's disgusting. I had the great satisfaction of telling him to his face in front of the judge, I know how the human body works. I've taken many anatomy classes. I did some research about squirting. I talked to your ex-girlfriends, and we all know that you were pissing inside of us like the dog that you are. It was nice to watch his jaw drop open when he saw I knew the truth, and he got shut down by the judge after that. Song, Fuck You by Lily Allen. I still enjoy remembering instances like this where I know I stood up to them and called these narcs out. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of these #Karma Fairy moments. I could always recognize something was off, and I usually called them on it, but I just didn't have the data to put it all together as being full-on narcissistic mind games just yet, so I stayed. When I finally saw what he was, I felt stupid for being fooled. But it's not that I was dumb. Oh, no. It was specifically because I was kind, giving, and big-hearted that it worked. It had nothing to do with intelligence. Narcissists go for the kindest and the most forgiving souls, the best people the world has to offer. Those are the qualities of an empath. Those are the qualities I am proud to have, I am proud to keep, and that no one can take away from me no matter what kind of abuse they try to put me through. They won't change those awesome qualities in me. They only taught me just how special and rare they truly are in human beings, and that I should be more careful before I share them with just anyone. Unfortunately, it's going to take 2 more narcissistic relationships before I learn that lesson for good. But you got to start somewhere, and Mr. Grandiose / ASPD Narc number 1 was my introduction to the toxic world of dysfunctional relationships. I wrote a letter to him that I never sent on December 27th, 2019, just a few days after it was finally over with him for good, and I was feeling shattered. I hadn't yet put all the narcissistic pieces together. However, it's a classic example of the game narcs all play to a T. Here's the letter. I'm sorry that I'm not strong enough to help you. I simply can't handle the emotional instability where 1 minute we're fine and great and I'm super happy and nothing is wrong. Bam! Then out of nowhere, what the fuck just happened? A fight? I end up confused, defensive, usually in tears, and I find myself becoming more careful about what I say or how I word things when I'm with you. I know that if this is starting now, it will only progress from here. I don't want to be that person, beat down and solely focused 100% on you because I've stopped speaking and forgotten myself. A perfect fan to follow you around and adore you and shower attention on you all the time, but I would not be me anymore. And I think every human being who has experienced a narcissistic relationship can relate to that. And that is the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 next week is Narc number 2, the always sick one, aka 3 restraining orders and a water bottle. Please tune in for that one. And thanks, guys. Subscribe, like, and listen. Share this. Education is key. There's more narcissists in the world now than ever before. Just look on the news. Stay safe. I'm glad you're a part of my tribe.